In this video, I'm going to talk about making InDesign files if you have a ride guide poem for our bus lines project. So we have two options for our ride guide sizes, and these are the dimensions for those. So these are pretty simple. These are going to be printed as a part of the page. So it's important to remember that if you want it to have a border around it, typically you wouldn't do that if it's going to be printed on its own page, right? But this is going to be on the page with a bunch of other stuff. So be sure to add a border if you want a border, and you could certainly leave it off if you don't want one, if you just sort of want it to kind of exist in its space and not have a border. So I'm going to move this out of the way. So I'm going to go into Create New and click on Print to make sure I'm getting CMYK because this will be commercially printed. And our first size here is 7.1875 inches by 3.5 inches. So this may look like a crazy exact number, but when it comes to printing something like the ride guide, all of the column widths are very specifically measured out. So it actually does make a lot of sense in printing terms. You'll see the same thing with something like newspapers or the isthmus, things like that. So I'm going to uncheck facing pages because this project doesn't have facing pages. And down here for margins, I would make sure this link is on, and I would just drop them to maybe 1/4 of an inch. So remember, margins are just sort of a reminder to you to not get too close to the edge of the page with your important content. But a 1/2 inch margin on a document this small is going to look kind of ridiculous and can throw you off a bit. So because these are graphics that are going to be kind of self-contained and displayed on a page with other stuff, there's no bleed. We're just sort of creating a standalone graphic. So we don't have to worry about our bleed. So I'll click Create. It's important to remember that because this is the ride guide, any graphics that I make must only be using the black swatch. So don't use registration. This is actually all of the inks, all kind of 100%. Black is 0 in all the channels except the black ink, which is the K in CMYK. You can absolutely change this to kind of any tint you want, but I wouldn't go much less than about 15%, or it's not really going to show up because remember, the paper isn't white, it's a newsprint, it's already kind of gray. So you have to have like a critical mass of ink for it to even show up. Gradients are fine, just make sure they change enough. You can't be too subtle with a ride guide because of the paper that it's on and because you're only working in one color. So you can do a lot with black and white. It can be beautiful. Just make sure you're not trying to do anything too subtle or too faint on the page. So for my other size, I'll go back to New Document, and I'm just going to leave it on Recent because it was already here, and this one, the other size is also 3.5 inches high, so I'll go 3.5937. So I'll go 3.5937, and I'll leave the rest of this the same. So we can see this one's a lot more square. So think about your poem, the length of it, how long are the lines, how many lines is it, and decide which format is going to work best for your poem. The ride guide makes sure that you don't push your type too small. So for the line of fine print that talks about our collaboration, try to keep that definitely above 6 points. And for your actual poem, try to keep that about 9 or 10. Kind of depends on the font, if it's a big open friendly font or a more condensed one. The condensed fonts maybe need to be a little bit bigger to make sure that they print well and can be read clearly. So that's how to set up your files for the ride guide for our bus lines assignment.